So, as all Dungeons and Dragons players know, DMs, or Dungeon Masters, are as close as we can possibly get to actual gods walking among us, and they are all completely above any and all criticism. But let's pretend for today that they're not, and let's talk about the most criticized element of Dungeon Master gameplay by far, railroading. And no, I'm not talking about DMs who keep setting their campaign in a train yard so that they can show off their model train gear. Railroading is a bit different, and that's the only train pun I'm going to be using in this whole video. You're welcome. Railroading is when the DM adjusts the story and the NPCs on the fly to steer the players in a very specific direction, basically putting the players on a rail where they can only go forwards or back, in a game where freedom of choice is the major selling point. For example, the players enter a cave that, unbeknownst to them, is the lair of the important villain in the campaign. Out of nowhere, the players decide that this seems a bit too dodgy, so they turn around to leave. But the DM has a whole encounter set up in the other room with their dwarven forge gear, and they want the players to see it, so the entrance to the cave inexplicably collapses, trapping the players inside the cave and forcing them into the encounter. If I say it like that, it sounds bad, I know, but believe it or not, there are a lot of valid reasons that a DM might do this. So today we're talking about the good and the bad of this all too common practice, in episode 2 of D&D. Someone commented on the last episode of this mini-series saying that I should have called it D&D Lemmas instead of D&D Dilemmas, and I hate myself for not seeing that earlier, but I haven't had a chance to change the title card yet, so... Hi, my name's Cam, this is Rogue's Roll Call, and welcome back to another video. I make lots of videos about Dungeons and Dragons, so if that's your kind of thing, then subscribe, stick around. D&D Dilemmas is the series where we take a controversial D&D topic and we chat about both sides to see where we stand. In the last episode we did metagaming, today we're doing railroading. I would be willing to bet that if you've been playing D&D long enough, you're pretty familiar with DMs railroading. It's happened to you. And when you notice that it's happening, it sucks. I say when you notice it because I'm gonna let you in on a little secret here. A secret that the other DMs don't want you to... Well, they probably don't care if you know. DMs are railroading you all the time. Like, all the time, just in teeny tiny ways. Whether it's that NPC giving you a vital, important piece of info that you need to move forward in the story, that for some reason none of the players have asked them about yet, or if it's a group of enemies dropping in on your camp so that you can get the battle plans off of their cold, limp body. There are a lot of ways that the DM is kind of forcing things to happen to you as the player that will help you know where to go next. But if you don't know that you're being railroaded, are you being railroaded? That's not me trying to be like philosophical. I don't know. I don't think so. I think it'll depend on the players at the table, but my golden rule when it comes to railroading is to make sure that the players know how to move the story forward, but I don't force them into it. Within reason. Sometimes I have to be a bit more firm, like if the players get way too comfortable shopping and flirting with NPCs in a major city for multiple sessions at a time, then sure, maybe a shady underbelly gang threatens them and tells them to leave town. that sounded very noir. Maybe your bard wakes up with a broken lute in his bed. Capiche? With all that said, I don't think this kind of stuff is what really comes to mind for most people when we hear the term DM railroading. Is it? I think when we hear that, we think of DMs that push the characters forward like they're trying to get them to buy the new limited edition Stanley Cup at Target.
Get him! Get him!
Pointy Hat made a really good video on railroading. Great D&D channel, I'm sure you're already aware of them, but highly recommend. His intelligence score is much higher than mine, but weirdly enough, I want to mention that video mostly because he used a lot of clips from the Truman Show, which I think is a really great, if not somewhat extreme example of what not to do. Putting the players in a theoretical bubble where you completely change the behavior of the NPCs and the world itself to keep the players on rails, is going to get their attention in a bad way. You don't want a bunch of sad Trumans in your game, you know, feeling trapped. Let's go ahead and look at an example of bad DM railroading. Anytime we wanted to explore or look for another way to travel, our DM would remind us that there was only one path between a mountain that we couldn't climb and a raging river that we would drown in. We literally could only go forward on a path. The campaign ended when an NPC was kidnapped and our party decided to go forward instead of rescuing him. The DM couldn't comprehend why we wouldn't save the NPC. He was a pacifist and refused to fight, so half of our party nearly died while he was traveling with us, and he would never attack anything unless it hit him, and actually told us that the plot couldn't move ahead because we had to save him and learn about the people who took him. I do not miss that campaign. So yeah, that's pretty bad. I'm not going to be too hard on the DM here because, I don't know, maybe they were new and planning for a big fork in the path moment, like taking a big side quest or declining to do so. Can be a lot of work to plan for. It can be pretty tricky. But that's kind of the gig, you know, with being a dungeon master. Player agency, or like the sandbox feel of Dungeons & Dragons, is one of the most attractive parts of TTRPGs as a whole. So presenting the players with this major choice and not planning for them just saying no, to the point where them making that choice means you had to end the whole campaign, it's a bit of an L. That's not even mentioning the part where the world itself is set up in a way that the players can only follow one path. That in particular feels very Truman Show. But hey, I hope the DM heard the feedback and worked on it for their next campaign. So there's this interesting branch of DMs using railroading that can be debated kind of on its own. I actually made an Instagram reel or TikTok about exactly this that I think sums it up well enough. Actually, I'll just show you. If we were talking about D&D and I said the words quantum ogre, you might think I'm talking about a monster that looks something like this, but not quite. A quantum ogre is a very specific type of DM railroading, specifically when the DM gives the players the illusion of choice. For example, the players can choose to go up the mountain path or through the road that goes through the swamp. But what they don't know is that no matter which path they choose, the DM is going to put the same ogre in their way. Basically, it's when the DM has something planned, and no matter which choice you make, all roads lead to that same planned result. Some people think that quantum ogres take away the player's agency, while some DMs think that it helps them prepare more interesting encounters and plot points. So quantum ogres are a bit of a different railroad where instead of keeping the players on a one-track system, the DM lets them choose a different path, but the players don't know that that path secretly winds back and connects to the original rail. I think quantum ogres are okay, maybe even necessary in a lot of cases. I mean, the campaign has an overall plot, and if the players keep deviating from that plot, you're kind of going to need to make adjustments and start putting those plot devices in their way, regardless of what they choose. If there's an important story moment that you need the players to witness or experience, I think it's perfectly fine to make that happen no matter what path the players go down. However, if I was to do this, if I was to use a quantum ogre, I would make sure that their decision has some impact on that story moment, on that ogre, even if it's in a really small way. That way, the player choice is still tangible. They can still see that it mattered. I'll give you an example. Going back to the players choosing between the mountain path that goes up into the snowy peaks or the swamp path that goes down into the, dense, wet forest. You need the players to encounter this ogre who holds the key to the mystery that the players are trying to solve. And that ogre is going to be at the end of each of these paths, no matter which one they choose, even though the players don't know that. If the players choose the mountain path, I would maybe say that the ogre is starving from a lack of wildlife to prey on due to the cold up here, and after the players offer the ogre some food to avoid a fight, the ogre is so grateful that they share those secrets that the players need for the plot. But let's say the players chose to go down into the swamp. They run into the ogre, who happens to be lost and miserable in this dark, damp place. The players help the ogre find their way out, and the ogre rewards them with those secrets. I don't use quantum ogres much at all. I haven't really needed to, luckily, but I have done it a few times. And it brings us back to the big philosophical question. If the player doesn't notice, is it even railroading? This comment on my Instagram reel doesn't think so, and honestly, I'm inclined to agree. But that's just me. What do you think about DM railroading? Have you had a particularly bad experience with a DM doing this? I'd honestly love to hear about it in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, especially for watching the whole video. It's very kind of you. I make lots of videos about Dungeons and Dragons, so if you're a player, a DM, or just someone who's interested in the game in general, then I would love it if you stuck around. I haven't really decided yet what the next D&D Lemmas video will be on, but if you have any ideas, leave a comment. Thanks again for watching. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Catch ya.